Welcome to the 13th part of the Blender 2.8 Beginners tutorial series. In this video it's all about lighting. We will check the different light objects, we will create a nice lighting for our scene, and we will adjust some of the materials so that they fit better to the overall scene in the end. And we will adjust the leaf and the fabric material so that the light can shine through this. As always, you can find the timestamps in the video description below. And if you want to follow along, sign up to our resource section free of charge. There you can download all the project files, textures and videos of this tutorial series and our handy Blender 2.8 shortcut PDF. Hi everyone, Zach here for cgboost.com and let's get started. Alright, my 3D viewport is still splitted into two 3D viewports. Here we have the camera view, which I enabled with numpad 0. And here we have the general view. And if I hold down the middle mouse button up here on the header and move this to the side, you can see that all the viewport gizmos and the viewport overlays are disabled. So we only see what will be in the final rendered image. Up here we still have the look depth viewport shading enabled, which is important if you quickly want to create materials and stuff. But if we want to see the final rendered image, we have to switch to the rendered viewport shading. We can do the same thing over here, middle mouse button click and hold, move this to the side, enable the rendered viewport shading. And right now we are using the Eevee render engine. So if I click on this camera symbol up here, you can see the render engine is set to Eevee. We also have the cycles render engine, which we also take a quick look later on. But now Eevee is enabled. That means this is the real-time render engine. So as you notice right now, although we don't have any lamp in our scene, we still can see the scene a bit. And that's because the world, if I click on this icon, don't confuse this with the material tab down here. The world is also affecting the lighting. It's basically an ambient lighting we can add here. You can see the color is set to gray. We can also change the color if we like and the brightness, but I just leave it this gray, and you can also play around with the strengths. But for now we leave it at 1. Later on we reduce the strengths to 0 because I want to have a pitch black background and only the lamps should affect the scene. But for now, when we learn about the different light types, it's better to see a bit of the background here. So first of all, if you want to add a light, hit Shift A, go to light and add one of those 4 light types. So let's add a point lamp here. Move this to the side, and the strength of this is too low right now. Let's go to the lamp settings down here. When you have the lamp enabled, you will see this little light bulb icon, and here we can change the settings. So first of all, let's change the power to something like 10, for example. Then we can change the color, as you can see. Then we can change the specular. You can see we have this little specular here, which should basically represent the lamp in the reflection, because the lamp has no size and no physical size. So there is no light bulb object or something like that. And that's why we have this virtual reflection in here. And with the specular, we can change the strength of this. With the radius, we can change the size of this virtual lamp object in the reflection, as you can see. The circle here, you can see how big this should be. Then we have the custom distance. If I reduce this, I can basically limit the distance of the light, which we will also make use of later on. But let's disable this for now. And as you can see, we have real-time shadows here. And these you can disable down here. And we also have a bunch of very technical settings, which in most cases helps us to avoid some little errors here and there, but we don't want to take a look at these right now. And we can also see this contact shadow, because sometimes you can see that somehow the light is peeking through the shadow where it is contacting the object. And if I enable contact shadow, there will be added another shadow on top of the other one, and with the distance I can also change the size of this, and this adds a little bit more realism to the scene. So let's delete this point lamp, and now let's simply add a sunlight. A sunlight basically simulates kind of the sun. Here the position is not so important, but the rotation. If I rotate this, you can see how the shadow is changing. So basically the line shows the direction where the sun is shining to. So and I can change the rotation, and as you can see here, we also have this specular from the sunlight, and this we use if we create an outdoor scene, for example. Here we have the same settings. We can change the color if we want to have a sunset feel, maybe increase the strength a bit. And down here we can also enable the contact shadow if we like. So the settings are the same as for the point lamp. So let's delete this one here and add a spotlight. Let's increase the power. And as you can see with this light, we have this nice spot. We have the same settings as before. The only difference here is the spot shape. We can change the size of the spot and also how hard or soft the edges should be. And the last lamp we have here is the area lamp. And this is also the lamp we will use for lighting up our scene. So again, let's increase the strength. You can see we basically have the same settings over here: color, power, specular. The only difference here is the shape. So right now we have a square shape. We can either scale it here in the 3D view by using S or by using this viewport widget. Then you can also see that the size is changing over here. If you don't want to have a square shape, you can also change this to a rectangle to make it wider on one edge, but not on the other, for example. And we also have a disk and an ellipse. And you can also see that the reflection in the object is changing accordingly. If I change this to disk, you can see that this has a round shape. So let's delete this lamp and start from scratch. First of all, let's go to the world settings and set the strength to 0. And over here, let's go to the look depth viewport shading so that we can see the lamp objects better. But here in the camera view, we will see how the final scene looks like. So let's select the scene collection over here, that all the new lamps which we add will for now be added to the main scene and not in one of those two collections. Let's hit Shift A and add a new area lamp. Let's move it up. And if you wonder why they are so dark all the time, and that's because at the beginning of these tutorials, we set the scene unit size to 0.1. And I guess because of this, the lamp power down here is also relatively low. So let's set this to 10 for now. And what I want to achieve here is a kind of 3-point lighting setup. And lighting is one of the most important aspects to make your 3D scene look beautiful. So no matter how awesome your models are, how awesome your materials and textures are, if you have a boring lighting like this here, for example, the whole thing looks just boring and not interesting at all. However, if we now set up the lighting, you will see how this will change drastically. So let's start with the backlight, which creates this rim light on our objects. So let's scale this down for now and place it somewhere here behind the objects. Let's rotate it a little bit that this is pointing towards the apples. And in this case, I want to have a rectangular shape and I want to make the X value a bit wider. You can see right now we have this nice sharp line here, which is caused by the lamp. And this helps us to separate these objects from the background. So we basically have a very contrasty separation line here. But we have it only up here. I also want to have it on the side here. And that's why I increase the X size of this. Now you can see how this also affects these apples over here. Then as you can see down here, this is too bright. And that's why we enable the contact shadow and increase the distance just a bit. Then I want to have an orange warm color because I want to have a warm feeling for the image, a warm mood. And that I achieve by simply changing the color to a warm orange tone. So we have the feeling of sun, something healthy, friendly, something like that. And that's why I changed the color over here. And if I rotate the view, you can see from the lamp we have this very sharp line here and everything is brightened up. And I want to limit this a bit, and that's why I enable custom distance. Let's reduce this quite a bit. You can see then we get this more roundish shape here. Not too much because I want to have the shadows in front here. And if I lift this up a bit, then we have this nice roundish shape. I don't use a spot lamp here because somehow the reflection of the spot lamp looks a little bit different than from the area lamp. And I think let's increase the power to 25 watts. So this looks good to me. Let's duplicate this, Shift and D. Rotate this somewhere here more from the front, which is kind of the key light. Let's make a square out of this, way smaller. Let's set the color back to white by simply setting RG and B back to 1. I think let's decrease the power just a little bit and move it a little bit closer. So this should not be perfectly from the front, just a little bit from the side, so we see the shape of the objects a bit better. We also have contact shadow enabled because I just duplicated the lamp, and also the custom distance. Make this a little bit further, but not too much. It's nice to have this here a bit darker than this here, because as mentioned before, here this is our main actor in the scene, the knife and the cut apple. So it's nice if we have a little bit more brightness over here and the rest is a little bit darker. So now let's duplicate this lamp once again. Put it somewhere here on the other side to basically brighten up the very dark areas here. But here let's lower the strength quite a lot. And here I want to have this bluish greenish color, something like this. So that is a nice contrast to the orange warm tone. So we basically color the shadows here a little bit bluish. And I think if we have this little reflection here, this also defines the shapes of the objects a little bit better. And in general, it looks like there is, for example, a window in the background, something like this. And this easy, we created this very simple yet very nice looking lighting setup. Remember, if I, for example, just add a simple area lamp. So this is basically the same scene with a boring lighting setup and the same scene with a bit more interesting lighting setup. So now let's do some adjustments on the scene and especially on some of the materials to fit the look of the final scene. First of all, let's select the ground here, and you can see that we have these lines going on here. And if we take a look at the fabric, we basically have this triangle going on here, which is pointing towards this spot here. So this we can call guiding lines. So these lines are guiding us to this area here. And we have these lines from the wood, and I just realized if I rotate the wood a bit to match more this line here, this somehow feels a little bit better. So as you can see, now we have these lines also pointing in this direction, this line's pointing in this direction, and the whole thing looks a little bit better. Talking about the wood here, let's go over to the shading. And I just realized that if we take a look from the camera perspective, let's disable the viewport overlays and gizmos, that if we want to concentrate on this area more, the background is too bright. So we also have this bright fabric here and the even brighter wood material that doesn't look that nice. So I thought it would be cool to color the wood a bit. So for that, let's select the wood here. Down here we have the wood shader. And up here we had the hue saturation node to color the wood a bit. This we will change in a second. And first of all, let's hit Shift A and add a color bright contrast node and put it behind the hue saturation value node. And now let's increase the contrast. And now you can see we have more contrast in the wood, which makes this look even nicer. I mean, even this helps a lot already, as you can see. So we can focus more on these objects. But let's also play around with the hue and the saturation. First of all, I want to increase the saturation quite a lot. Now we have the red color. I hold down Shift, left click and hold on this hue value and slightly move this to the side. And you can see now we can change the color. We could have red wood, yellow, green. Green would fit in terms of complementary color compared to the red apple, but I played around and I like this mixture of blue, greenish a bit more here. So if we take a look here, this looks like if we have wood with a little bit of blue paint, which was sanded somehow. And if we take a look from the side to see the reflections better, this looks a little bit too much like plastic. So let's change the color ramp over here of the roughness a bit more. Let's change this to nearly black so that the very glossy spots are really glossy. And now let's move this one way over to this side. And then you can see that it looks like if we have just a few spots of paint here, which are glossy, and the rest is relatively rough. And in this way, the whole wood looks way more realistic. Now let's take a look from the camera perspective. Make sure that we still see a little bit of the reflections over here. And I think to better see the reflections in the front here, we should go to the area lamp from the background, the orange lamp, and increase the custom distance a bit. You can see it was basically cutting off the light in the front here. Now we can see the shadow of the apple, the reflection in the knife, and also the reflection here on the ground a bit better. Then let's select the apple and maybe play around a little bit with the reflection. Make it a little bit more glossy in some areas, but in other areas a little bit less glossy. and with the water drops, then the apple looks really wet because some of the areas are relatively strong in glossiness. Let's select the fabric here, and you can see over here the holes inside of the fabric are relatively small, and I want to see through this a bit more. So let's take a look on the color ramp which is connected to the alpha and add a little bit more black and maybe a little bit less white. So the chords are a bit thinner basically, and then we can see through this a bit better. So and the last thing I want to do here on the materials, let's select the leaf, is to make the leaf a bit translucent. If you take a look at real leaves and the sun is peeking through the leaves, you can see the sunlight on the opposite side of the leaves and also the shadows and so on. And this effect I also want to have here. You can see here the light is shining on top of the leaf, but we can't see anything down here. It's just black basically. So what we do, select the leaf, and for that we need to add the translucent shader. So hit Shift A, shader, and click on translucent and place it somewhere here. And for the color of the translucent, so basically the color we see on the other side of the leaf, we want to have the same color and also the same bump map, which we connect from down here to the normal input of the translucent shader. Let's quickly connect it with the surface to see what's going on here. Now we have this bright spot on the opposite side of the leaf. So now we want to mix this with the principled shader. So hit Shift A, add a mix shader, place it here. Now let's connect the translucent shader with the first shader input and the principled shader with the second shader input and the mix shader output to the surface input. Now with the mix factor up here, we can change how much of both we want to have. If I set this to 0, I only have the upper shader, which is the translucent shader. And if I set this to 1, I only have the principled shader, and everything in between is the mixture of both. So you can see if I set this to 0.5, we have this worn out edges here. So, and if I go even further, the alpha completely disappears. And that's why we have to calculate the alpha after we have added the translucent shader. So what we do, let's simply duplicate the mix shader, put it back here, connect the mix shader here to the lower input, which is basically everything we set up here, the whole color and everything. And with Shift A, let's add a transparent shader. Put it up here and connect it with the upper input. So now if I set this to 0, we only use the transparent shader, which is just transparent as you can see. If I put this to 1, we can only see the other stuff. And now I want to use the alpha mask, the transparent information of this leaf image as mix factor. This was basically just a black and white image. The leaf was white and the outer part was black. And now the black parts will be shown as the transparent shader and the white parts will be shown as all the other stuff here. And now we have the nice alpha. And now we can also play around with this mix shader to change the strength of the translucency. And as you can see, this is working. And since both leaves are using the exact same material, you can see this is changing on both at the same time. This makes the whole thing a bit more realistic. And maybe we can change the glossiness a bit. It's maybe a bit too glossy for my taste. So, and the same effect we added to the leaf here, we can also add to the fabric because this is also a bit of translucent. So here I use the same technique. First of all, I hit Shift A, add a translucent shader, a mix shader behind here, and a transparent shader up here. Then let's duplicate this, connect everything in the right order. The translucent shader I connect with the color and with the normal map down here, and the mix shader for the transparency, so that the transparency is working again. We connect this time with the color ramp, which we connected to the alpha, which defines the alpha channel. So now you can easily change the factor over here, and you can see that the light is peeking through the fabric here. As you can see on the apple, for example, this fabric is also interacting with the shadow, which on the other side hits the fabric object. However, you can see it's not really interacting with the bowl, which is underneath the cloth here. and I didn't find a way to solve this issue. If you find a way, let me know in the comment section below. However, we will create our final rendering with the physical-based cycles render engine, which will not show these errors here. So for real-time display, this is absolutely okay, and if we just add a slight translucency effect here, we can't see it that strong anyway, and then the whole cloth thing looks much better, I think. Just look here, this looks way better integrated to the whole scene, I think. So now we have this nice scene, we have adjusted the lighting and all the materials, and now we can move over to rendering the scene. Don't forget to save. Yeah guys, now you know how to use the light objects in Blender and how to create a nice lighting for your scene to create a nice mood. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell underneath this video if you want to get notified for future videos. If you want to extend your Blender knowledge and enjoy our tutorials here, you might also enjoy our Blender 2.8 Launchpad course, which is a comprehensive introduction into Blender 2.8 with short videos, fun exercises and easy to understand, and in the end you've created a fully animated car scene like this one here. If you want to learn more and check the free preview videos, click on the link in the video description below. Thanks a lot for watching guys, now check the next video where we will take a closer look at the Eevee render engine with all the settings, some nice effects we can enable, and we will learn how to export a final image. I will see you there, goodbye.